Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our latest episode of the DXM podcast. I am Colborn Bell, and I am joined today by ex-urban planner, future potential urban planner, and currently doing some writing, JGC. I got that right?
That's right.
All right, bit of a tongue twister for me. I'm going to call you Jay.
That's great.
We start the episode in the same place always, and that is really just giving you the space to describe really anything you would like the audience to know about yourself, your background, and how you came to be here.
Yeah, cool. So I guess most people listening to are familiar with crypto, and I guess the world of crypto, and I guess the problem in this space that I've been trying to think about for a few years now is what what is the real world point of it all, and because it's a lot of fun, and everyone is having a lot of fun. Some people are making a lot of money. Some people are losing a lot of money. But I think it's just overall it's entertaining. And there's the meme of the enjoyer. I think it's hard not to find some enjoyment in the space, but there are a lot of legitimate critiques about calling it just a world of scams, or it's all frivolous. And I think so a lot of those critiques are have some teeth. So I've been trying to, just for my own, I I started digging in. I guess I'm both in crypto and NFTs. I guess I'm um, perpetually more interested. I've never been like an investor necessarily, and so I perpetually more interested in the ideas than buying the things, which is have some of the things, but it's not like I've become ridiculously wealthy or anything on these ideas. But I'm still just trying to wrap my head around what is everyone doing here, and can it be useful. My background is in urban planning, city planning. So I have a degree in that. I worked in a consulting firm doing city planning, and kind of my gripe after being close enough to kind of understand the ways that physical places are made, especially in America, that's where I live, is that there's not a lot of people. The average person doesn't have a lot of agency in the way that their physical space, their city is governed or made, and they don't have a lot of don't end up with a lot of stake in the place. And when people don't care about places over the long term, um, the places erode, and people become disengaged, and aren't very happy people, and which is kind of seems that's the way the world is going. And so I guess, like, broadly, I'm trying to understand what in crypto can be useful to making physical places more healthy. um, and I've also hung around just from paying attention, have a general understanding, because I think that the way that you heard of me in the first place is hang out in the JPEG forums. So I've definitely gotten kind of in the weeds, just became friends with some artists and some people who aren't necessarily thinking about physical space at all. But I still think there's a connection worth exploring. So that's what I'm trying to do right now.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. Where really do you want to begin? Let's always start positive, and then we'll get into I guess probably more of the critical aspects. Would love to know at least what about crypto kind of attracted your attention, your interest. What about kind of like these rapidly fluctuating, vibrating, continuously moving communities? This like fluid idea of value. What really sparked your interest, and where did you see promise?
Yeah, I think that yeah, basically what has me still around is that I started, again, like I said, I didn't buy a gigantic chunk of Bitcoin when I first heard about it, but when when I first heard about Bitcoin, I think was like a Facebook friend was posting about it in 2014, and I started reading about it, and it was clearly just a new idea.
Mm,
Um, and I think that a new ideas probably are worth something. You know, a new something genuinely new can't be only a scam, I
mm,
think. And so I guess it's hard to say what caught my attention. I mean, I know if you're in this space at all, you probably had that point where you went down the rabbit hole kind of. And so I ended up learning about Ethereum. But I think the first like uh, worth talking about it project that piqued my interest was in, I think, like 2018. I started hanging out in, it was a rocket, it was called Rocket Chat, but it was for MakerDAO,
mhm,
which is basically the first stable coin on Ethereum. And you know, since day one, those guys have been talking about integrating with the real world. Um, and to, I mean, to a lot of the critiques today of MakerDAO are that they're, you know, they're kind of like selling out to they're not, uh, their governance is kind of messy. It's very people heavy. It's not like it's not a vision of like a crypto anarchist vision of like no people involved kind of world, but uh, the possibility of, you know, a stable currency that's, you know, people all over the world, they don't need to be speculating, they can just use the system and it helps them, and no one can control it or stop it. I think that was like the first powerful idea to me that um, it I think and back in the day, in the beginning of 2018, uh, so sadly one of the first guys who he co-founded MakerDAO, the DAI stablecoin, was his name was Nikolai, and he recently passed away sadly, but uh, his vision was a little bit more hands off,
mhm.
um, of how you can make. So that I think was the thing that stuck with me, is like, oh, maybe you could make a system that um, no one can touch and is useful for more than speculation. Um, so yeah, I guess
Yeah,
that was.
I mean, just having dabbled around in experiments with DAOs, running kind of the museum as I call it a quasi DAO or a DAO in transition. Um, Governance is incredibly people heavy. It feels like always. Has there been a project that you feel has elements that have begun to crack this code?
Yeah, so actually, that's it's interesting. The thing that, so out of Die, there were a lot of critiques of it being too governance heavy, and so um, some people started this. It's called, based on ungovernance, stable coin called Rye, um, and it has it's only Ethereum. Uh, so the basic way that like a stable coin like MakerDAO works is that you have collateral, you collateralize the loan, but it's over collateralized. So if the price of ETH drops, you know, the system can still call back the loan in time to not have it be worth less than the amount of the loan it gave. So for Rye, it's kind of a not doesn't in, it's very low governance project and is a stable coin that produces that, but it's a less dynamic system.
Hmm.
And so actually one of the co-founders, like a couple weeks ago, came out and said, actually, so the contracts are deployed and you can't, uh, they're they're basically not tweakable. And so, or swap outable. So he came out and said, I regret making only one collateral type ETH available, because now there are liquid staking options like Steth,
Yeah.
staked ETH, um, and our system can't. We're going to have to redeploy the whole thing if we want to be able to incorporate a liquid staking coin, and no one's going to want to use our product. So um, there are other considerations, which I think is the interesting thing is today DAOs are pretty, like you said, they get really messy really quickly, and there's no, I think, like really great example of people collaborating on chain really well together and creating something, like really fantastic. But I would say, this is my personal, I guess, is something that I would say, given that how I introduce myself, which is I'm trying to think about physical places. But I think
Mhm.
that one of the reasons why the governance doesn't work is because at the end of the day, people don't care about the projects, and they don't need to, because they don't have nothing to do with, they're completely digital, and they were hoping they could make some money, but otherwise they have no bearing on their actual life. And I think that's, part of the problem. And so maybe integrating, so I think that a lot of the ideas that DAOs are operating on have been around for a long time, like cooperatives, and
Sure.
you can have, there's like communal land structures, like uh, a there there are ways of communally owning land legally, like a community land trust, those kinds of things. Those ideas have existed, but the structures are hard. I think, like the it's hard to, you spend a lot of time on administration, and you don't, and people who care about the place kind of get bogged down in administration. So I think if we can, you have people who care about a place, but we have the structures that are provided, um, and kind of like forkable, copy pastable. Um, I think the it basically, I think the ideas around DAOs might work a lot better uh, for communities that already exist and have a reason
Mm.
to exist, besides, number go up on their coin.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I don't think we've any project has really particularly passed the threshold of like 10,000, right? That seems to be where everything uh, beyond that, it's like too large to govern. Below that, it kind of, like slowly fades into irrelevance. Um, I think that has just been. Do you think there's anything around like that number that is like ideal for this type of governance?
You mean, what do I think the ideal, like, group size is, maybe, for on-chain governance?
Sure.
I mean, so Dunbar's number is what, like 150. They
Right.
they say that, like, you can't maintain like a broader scope of relationship, like you can't maintain meaningful understanding and relationship between people, like, beyond 150.
Yeah.
Um, and probably that's in person, which is, uh, there are a lot more cues between people in person than digital. So, like, I actually it could be possible that the number online is lower. But I think that you can, which some people have been, I guess, building out the infrastructure for this kind of, but I think that you could probably, if you have a DAO that is organized in teams, and each team has their role, and that team is, um, 50 or less people, I think you could build like webs of organizational structure,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I don't think that you can get any meaningful governance done if it's just like vote on this, discuss this proposal and vote on it, and okay, there's 10,000 people. Um, you can't hear 10,000 people
Sure.
um, meaningfully. So yeah.
So let's take maybe some of your background in urban planning, and let's begin to kind of like translate it into these digital spaces, these digital environments. Um, for you, what would be kind of like an ideal conception? I always think of these digital spaces as places where we get to iterate and play and experiment in exponential ways that we can't do physically.
Right.
So I'm curious for you, kind of what an ideal metaverse would begin to look like. What do these spaces invite? What are the problems that we're trying to solve, and how do we take possibly the lessons from there back into the real world?
Yeah, I think that there is a um I think that the good thing about a digital space is that it's super, so what I think is incredibly important just for people, uh, in general, is to have agency, so feel some sort of ability to act and affect the world and not be controlled. And so I think digital spaces are really good for that, because you can kind of, especially if you, which I am not, but I know that, still the ability to code is really powerful, and the ability to deploy, like a financially consequential application onto a blockchain today is like, that's something real that you can do that doesn't, so yeah, in my background from urban planning, I'll say that in the physical realm, it's very difficult to build something or to have something get built, without a lot of red tape, uh, and without a lot of, basically you're required to involve a lot of professionals that aren't you, unless you are that professional, in order to build a house or, um, you know, buy and open a restaurant, or and a lot of, especially maybe like food safety or something, like some of those things are obviously a good thing, but I
Sure.
think that uh, we've gone far enough that we basically have an affordable housing crisis and a lot of other problems that I think can be attributed to lack of agency and lack of ability to, kind of build your own community. So I think that digital spaces are really good for just like allowing people to flex that muscle a little bit. Um, and I think that blockchains especially are, financially, people are building, so I think it basically just building financial systems that can, it's bad for when people lose money, but I think a lot of people have observed that where we're kind of like speed running, recreating, uh, like the traditional financial world, but just instead of over like 1,000 years, it's over like 5 years. So, well, and obviously there's a lot of financial history beyond 1,000 years, but so I think, yeah, just in general, maybe I'm just repeating your original question, your original statement, but I think that in general, digital spaces are very good for creating the kind of agency that hopefully will create some demand in the real world when there's this disconnect between like, okay, I can do something, I have control over, and hopefully, you know, the world of crypto can help, you know, give people digital agency in ways that uh, people demand it kind of in the physical world as well, because it's possible through crypto.
And I find again and again that I'm sure you're familiar, the kind of the bell curve meme of just having like the most degenerate, like you can't call them stupid, but just I don't know, just wild people, and then some of like the most brilliant people. And I find
Definitely.
it is just a fascinating subsection of humanity that gets attracted to these places. Uh, you know, you talk about kind of like the speed running of recreating. Do you think that that is what is just primarily attractive to both of these types of individuals?
Yeah, probably. I mean, definitely, it's just interesting to be in the Wild West, kind of with like, I mean, if you look at 2022 in crypto, you like it's just completely insane in a lot of bad ways, but it's interesting too, you know. Um, but I do think that there is. I recently heard, I forget the source, but it was a uh, interview with Vitalik, uh, and he was talking about how, so generally, I guess, like the idea in crypto has historically been, especially like in the world of Ethereum, people are building protocols that can stand up to any kind of attack or spamming or just stupidity, uh, because it's a universal system,
Yeah,
with just like in pure insanity happening all the time, and things that might not be logical, or things that are just, you know, crazy. So like that's what I guess the idea, like the general idea of like code is law. Like if I can do it, it's permissible culturally. Um, then I think that there's an interesting, I guess there's like, um, there's a place for everyone in crypto, because I think that that's kind of the uh, what is necessarily true in a universal system like Ethereum, like that anyone can deploy any kind of program and it can interact with all the other ones automatically. You have to build for adversaries and stupid people.
yeah.
um, but I do think that so that's Ethereum. But then in the world of Cosmos, which I have not, I'm less familiar with for less long. But I know their general architecture is set up so that basically communities can create their own self-sovereign blockchains that kind of are more less universal and more socially managed, um, or have um, you know, different rules that are specific for that specific community. Um, so that's really interesting to me too, because that is the way that specific physical places work. You know, like you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to build um, the the park in your neighborhood for every single human on Earth. You know, you
Right.
just make it for the way that you want it. And so I think it's good that we're kind of a spectrum of infrastructure is being built. One, you know, like for possibly universal money, but also one for local monies. You know, um, yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just like an increase uh, like a returning of power to just local people, local governments, more local independence. Um, I mean, do you feel probably like, would you agree that in our lifetime we have seen probably an increased power grab from places at the top?
You mean like increasing centralization or,
Yes.
bureaucratization?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely. So I think that, yeah, it's interesting to see the arc of the internet, which a lot of people have talked about this, who have done no more than I do about the internet. But the general arc is that it was kind of a place where individuals had a lot of agency, especially. So I actually tweeted about this semi recently, but the thing that you don't think about the beginning of the internet is that it was actually kind of like regional networks
Sure.
that were based in a place because that's how the phone line ran, and you made local calls to connect to the internet, and you uh, spread and you talk to people about your little network you were running. You just spoke to them locally, and so the very beginning of the internet, the non government based internet, was out through local places. Um, and then as it became universal, it still had that element of, it's kind of not a controlled space, or a space that's managed collectively by everybody. Um, but then, as people found opportunities to monetize the universality of the internet, then you got, we got Google and Amazon and Apple, and so I think that the centralization of power on the internet, or at least like those companies' ability to direct our attention and uh, money. Yeah, I think that the centralization of those organizations has you also, when you have such large organizations, I think that the institutional structure to manage that also has to swell a little bit, because you you have to contain an economy that's now a lot more global, or you have to try to manage an economy that's bigger, so you make the institutions bigger. Um, so it's kind of like an arms race between institutions and economies. And yeah, I think that, you know, that makes them move in a certain direction of centralization.
Do you anticipate the same story playing out in blockchain? Or do you
Of
think just,
centralization,
yeah, or do you
or of
think
like
just,
monetization.
yeah, monetization, centralization, just there being only very few gateways in which people access it, and those gateways are kind of limited as far as functionality, unless you kind of have this like deeper technological understanding to go around
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's hard to say, because like the foundations, obviously, of the prominent blockchains so far are kind of cypherpunk, like
Sure.
refusing that kind of control is super core to a lot of the people who um, have the ability to most influence the systems. And so, yeah, but I think that um, though I think the thing that those people take for granted is that they have skills that other people don't have. Um, and so it's difficult. I think that's a really hard thing, in the world of blockchains, that you don't just get in a you know, in your town. Like the city, New York City could give a lot more power back to small local neighborhood groups to uh, decide how to manage their tax dollars, you know,
Mm,
much more locally, or that kind of thing. And that is, even though it does take skill to create like an organizational structure or decide things, or to hire an engineer to build a road, or you know, that kind of thing, it um, in the world of blockchains, especially when uh, you have a lot of financial stake, you like there's only um, you know, so many people in the world that are capable of building a uh, universal money system and coding it, and you know, getting it on chain and deploying this system. And so I think, yeah, the people that are capable of that take for granted that mm, very few people are. So yeah, bridging that gap, um, and moving towards, you know, real usable systems, but that also have allow agency um, at their core is yeah, it's definitely hard, because I can't uh, I don't know how to deploy anything on chain on my own in Solidity. I know, like, actually, I think it's really great. There's tools like Manifold
sure.
um, that allow people to deploy their own contracts, and so you aren't dependent on OpenSea. Your contract is not on OpenSea, but it is still, you have a certain dependence um, on Manifold. Uh, so yeah, it's that's a
And
super tough problem to
And
solve.
I love Manifold, but it, as an A16Z company, right, heavily backed, it's almost like whoever has the most capital behind them will have the longest runway, and they can, right, they don't have any sort of revenue model. So they can just like acquire users,
Right,
and then, it ultimately flows into one of the largest VCs in the world. Um,
right. Yeah, I
so
think,
even that is in my mind just like a bit dangerous.
yeah, that just in specific is interesting, I think, because A16Z has so much money in the space, and they obviously, you know what they're doing.
Right.
You know, like they understand the basic ideas that make blockchains powerful, but they also are kind of uh, they they're taking agency from other people when they have such uh, when they have that much control over the system, or that much money in the system, that and therefore that much influence. Um, but so I think it's a good thing that there's kind of like a broadly held contempt for A16Z, but I don't know if it's enough to
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think most people know where all that money is going, right? And they're never
right.
going to. So it's almost a bit of like a bait and switch of here, take this thing up front. It's free today. Yeah, I'm sure they don't even know why, but they just want people using it. Um,
Right. Right.
so, and that obviously has been a long-standing tech growth model that has led to a ton of centralization.
Hmm.
Uh, but simplifying user experience always will lead to growth, and then
Yeah.
kind of just like the long of that is who has the capital to just keep it running the longest.
Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily bad that, you know, a large corporation or investor can create tools that make them money, um, because it, it's typically pretty easy for someone else to deploy something similar,
Sure.
which maybe it's the way it's always been. But for people who want to um, maintain their agency, um, and with enough curiosity, that's possible. So
Yeah.
um, I think one of there's this guy named James C. Scott. He's like relatively famous anarchist who works at Yale, and he wrote several books. One of them is called The Art of Not Being Governed. And its basic thesis is that he studied specifically like mountainous regions in Southeast Asia, and that there's these communities of people that ended up in physically hard to reach places because um, they didn't want to be bothered by large centralized states
Hmm.
that wanted, have their benefits. But also, uh, you know, tend to control people or, um, uh, yeah, exert a certain amount of control. And so I think that kind of thing is easier in crypto. You can always build and find a system um, that will give you some amount of control or is interesting or it matches your the way you want to live, quote unquote, easier. I think than like actually moving to a mountainous region with your family or something. It's easier
True.
on chain, I think. But the trick is, yeah, I guess in the long run, integrating or creating enough momentum that it matters in the real world. Um, because you know, it, if I still think you need to
I mean,
bridge it back to the real world. And when only A16Z can pay to make their project, legally compliant, but
right.
the guy who can do it cheap and easy and quick, and uh, you and that you want to use his system can't make it legally compliant. That's the hurdle, I guess, is.
I mean, the beauty is that all the code is transparent. The contracts are transparent. Like what is so anybody at any time, anywhere can just fork it, right?
Right.
And if if the
Well,
code is
that's the interesting thing. Like that, so it's actually coming up soon. But I think that Uniswap v3,
yeah,
they put like some in in the code. It was, I think maybe it was 2 years or something like that. But it said, no one can fork this for 2 years, or else, we're coming after you legally. Like,
right,
yeah, you
right,
can fork it, but
yeah.
we're gonna come after you. Um, if you fork it within 2 years. And I think that limit's coming up, and then we're going to see a lot more interesting things happen. But um, yeah, that like interaction with like real legal systems is interesting
Yeah, I mean,
because
look, code itself is law first and foremost,
mhm,
right? These systems are so slow to stop and catch up with everybody that is trying to fork and do something innovative.
right, yeah, that's it's enforceable, and like a lot of the enforcement agencies, the US government, are like they're several years behind in enforcing, but a
Yeah,
lot of times they do, you know enforce. So, or they'll, especially, I
I
think
mean,
it's a
they
good thing.
enforce in places,
Right, selective.
like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. um
Like I was around for
but
2017. I think a lot of people then knew what they were doing was wrong, but they just, I mean,
mhm, right,
99 out of 100 got away generally scot free.
uh-huh, yeah. Yeah, it's just an interesting, and so I think that is escapability, that ability to create something that is outside of the legal system but still functions.
Hmm.
um I think that will continue, uh like that. basic possibility is not isn't going away, but yeah, it's still, in general, if I want to use some of these systems to better govern and manage, my local municipal government's money, or like have their flow of money be on chain and more transparent. Like I obviously want that system to be, it needs to be, it needs a checkout, so some of the systems will necessarily have to, I guess, find some legal standing. So I think it's going to take a while to get there, but hopefully the possibility of that kind of organization, it will create the necessity to, reasonably regulate it, but we'll see.
Yeah, words. Well, that does take us to time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let the last word be yours. If there's anything you want to share that we might have missed, let people know where they can find you if you're open to talking with them. Anything you'd like to share?
I guess, yeah, my Twitter is JGCFYI. I'm going to hopefully in the next, month or two post. I have, like I said, about 50 pages on working from, why is agency important? What are the ways that we don't have it today? And then how could we possibly build it with some of these new technologies that exist on chain? And thanks for having me on. And yeah, feel free to DM me on Twitter if anyone's interested in talking about these ideas anymore.
Cool. We'll cut it there. I am Colborn Bell. This is the DXM podcast. Special thanks to our guest JGC, and shout out to DMINTI for putting us all together. Thanks, everybody.
Breaking news.